So how important is your mindset when you're adapting to difficult challenges? What can a change in mindset do for you? In this episode, I talk with Tom Seaman, and he tells his story and how changing his mindset allowed him to adapt to his situation and completely change his life for the better. And he provides a template for you to do the same.
Through that tragedy taught me life is finite. You really have a short window to take what it is from life that you want and enjoy it.
You can go back to that day, February 18th, 1990, and change what happened. My honest answer is I wouldn't change it.
You're just going to have to go through it, and your strength is going to be found in simply going through it and being authentic and real in the process.
I was talking with my palliative care doctor today, and she turned around to me and she looked at me and she was like, do you think that you'll eventually beat this? And I was sort of like, yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to do.
No, nothing will ever take away the pain of my daughter not being here. It's my reality.
Well, I know what my body's going to do to me. I've got a wheelchair in my future. You know what I've been looking for?
What's that?
One with off-road wheels.
Just remembering me as I am, happy and energetic and full of life, no matter what.
You can expect life to kick you in the teeth, but you always get back up, no matter what, and you just keep going.
Living Adaptive with Scott Davidson, a podcast about learning to live adaptively.
Yo, what's up, everyone? We got author and coach Tom Seaman, who specializes in providing tools and techniques to adapt to adversity. This is a really good show. We really appreciate Tom for coming on. So let's jump into this. What's up, Tom Seaman? Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks, Scott.
So, Tom, you have a bunch of stuff going on. You life coach, you write a lot, you write books, you write text, you're everywhere on the internet. You're easy to find. We can find a bunch of articles that discuss, methods of adapting to life. How long have you been doing this for?
Well, the coaching and the writing stuff I've been doing for probably the last 5 or 6 years. And that was after a long recovery from an illness that I developed back in 2001.
Is that what motivated you? What was your illness, and is that your motivation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was actually, I left college. I went into the business world for about 6 or 7 years, and I wanted to go back to graduate school to get my master's degree in counseling. And that's when I began to notice bizarre symptoms that I was having of where my body, my neck in particular, was moving involuntarily. And I couldn't control it. And I didn't have any idea what was going on. It wasn't real severe, but it was just something that was kind of bugging me a little bit. And I was going to grad school, and it was progressively getting worse, and I was getting treated for it. And it got to the point where it was my neck actually began to get locked over to the right shoulder and began to spasm and contract forcefully to where it caused pain that literally just dropped me to my knees. And I went to a bunch of doctors, and I finally learned that I had a condition called dystonia. And in my case, it's called cervical dystonia because it affects my neck. And that forced me to drop out of school because I could barely stand up to walk, had a hard time talking because I was gasping for breath all the time because the pain was so severe. And I had to stop my job. I was working as an intern at the Career Development Center at the college, and I was still involved with some of my businesses, and had to basically stop completely everything and could not function on my own because I pretty much lived on my floor rolling around in pain all day long. And so I was forced to move back in with my parents. As you mentioned, I live in Wilmington. I didn't move here by choice. I actually moved here because I had to, or else I wasn't going to survive because my family was here and they brought me down to basically take care of me. And so I worked through that for many, many years to get to the point where I could become functional again, to where I can begin trying to recreate my life. And that took a different avenue. I was going to go through the counseling, avenue, and I ended up getting involved with helping other people who were struggling with the same thing I was. And that then led itself into life coaching. And then I got involved with writing and eventually wrote a book. So it's just kind of steamrolled from there.
Yeah, your book is definitely a passion project, along with, being a real professional, tidy work on how to encounter difficult things. And I noticed Michael J. Fox Foundation added your book as a resource. It's been featured in other areas, including Pain Free Living magazine. So it's kind of a big deal. It is a really big deal. Well, I want to know, when you got to writing this book, you had to put a lot of vulnerable stuff in there, vulnerable stuff about yourself. How did you get to the point that you were ready to share this?
I actually was really never, even from the very beginning, I was never really all that uncomfortable in being open about what I was experiencing. I was visually very symptomatic, and it looked like I was in some severe car accident or some other kind of had some major injury or something like that because of the nature of my neck and body being so twisted, which is the nature of dystonia. Dystonia is a neurological movement disorder. It's where messages in the brain are not functioning properly and not communicating with the body properly, and it causes involuntary movements and muscle contractions and spasms and tremors. And, a lot of people are familiar with things like Parkinson's or tremor or what's called essential tremor. I'm still not too sure what's essential about a tremor, but that's what it's called, is essential tremor. So it's in the family of movement disorders. And so I was visually very symptomatic, and people would often look at me and ask me questions, and I was really quite open with talking about it. I kind of felt, even from early on, that it was I felt like it was when I learned what it was, I felt like it was almost a responsibility that I had. And so I've always felt really comfortable talking about it. However, there were some real deep, dark stuff that I got into that I was not so much comfortable about. And that took me a little bit of time to work through to get to the point where I felt I had to kind of do it. It was almost a form of therapy for myself to just basically be as naked as I possibly could to let people know what I've gone through. Because what I realized, to answer your question really, what I realized is that a lot of people were going through the exact same thing I was, but it was almost a taboo subject, almost like suicide. You don't talk about suicide or something like that, that kind of topic. And it was almost taboo, and it was actually a disservice to myself and to other people who were suffering. And so I felt that the more I was able to expose myself and expose to other people, it helped me better accept myself for who I was, to embrace the suffering that I was going through, and to let people know they were not alone.
Now, it raises this question: everyday life. How did it impact everyday life? Like, how about, like, more specifically, how did this impact social life?
Gone completely. Zip, zero, nada.
How'd you deal with it?
Not very well. I drank a lot. I drank to medicate. I drank to medicate the physical pain and the emotional pain, and that became my friend. A can of beer became my friend. That's what it basically was. Which that lifestyle, plus having an awful diet. So I was suffering with pretty severe depression.
Sure.
And so I had an awful diet. I was extremely sedentary because my condition was such that moving was extraordinarily difficult. I put on 150 pounds. And that probably was more embarrassing for me than my neck issue was, even though the neck was pretty severe. But being overweight, someone who was a former top-notch athlete in many sports, to become this obese person who was, just knocking on the door for having a stroke or a heart attack at 35 years old was, I couldn't wrap my head around that. And so I completely isolated myself from the world. And I did that for about 5 years. And it's hard for me to put to words how awful that experience was. I didn't even recognize myself when I looked in the mirror. I remember getting the photograph that was taken of me Christmas 2005. And it was me with my nephew and my niece. And they were standing behind me. I was sitting down. I was opening up a Christmas present they had given me. A month later was my birthday. And they came to see me, and they gave me a card, and they gave me a picture of them with some guy on it. And for about 30 seconds, maybe longer, I'm not sure exactly, I was looking at this picture going, why in the hell would they give me a picture of them with some guy I don't know? I didn't understand it. And I realized it was me. And I went, holy hell, is that how I really look? Am I really that fat? And my niece, she was about 10 or 11. And she goes, Uncle Thomas, okay, the camera adds 10 pounds. I'm like, how many damn cameras are on me? So it was rough. So I was embarrassed. And the thing about the social life is that I was not only embarrassed by my weight, I was incapable of keeping up with everybody else. And so friends fizzled out, and I also removed myself from social relationships because I couldn't physically handle the demand it was to even go out for a drink, even go out for a bite to eat, just to grab a cup of coffee, just to go to a movie. It was too hard sometimes for me to get from my bed to my kitchen to eat breakfast to lay on the floor for the rest of the day, which is what it was for a while. So to go out and make plans, it was like not even in my radar whatsoever.
You mentioned living with severe depression. What does that mean to you? What was it like for you to go through severe depression?
Basically, I felt like I was dying, and I was just waiting to die. I found joy in nothing at all whatsoever. I did not laugh about anything. I found nothing humorous. I felt as though if I wasn't healthy enough to do anything, then if I couldn't do anything with, it's hard to really say this. I was asked by someone one time when I was going through some other issue. They said, "What do you do for fun?" And I said, "Whatever it is, when I don't feel like total crap." And I've realized in recent years that I could actually still have a lot of fun while still not feeling well. And oftentimes by doing that, I actually feel better. But for me at that point, I realized I felt if I have no life, and so why even try? That was my attitude. Why even make the effort? I don't care about gaining more weight. I don't care about more pain. I don't care. I didn't care anymore. Basically, that's what it was for me. Depression for me was I did not care about anyone or anything at all. I just wanted to die, but I was too afraid to take my own life.
Wow. Yeah. That seems to be a common theme, is that I don't want to exist, but I don't want to necessarily take it myself. But if it went dark right now, okay. And so that's
exactly.
Those are dark moments that a lot of people go through. And so they can be pretty intense.
I spent years, 3, 4, 5, 6 years like that, where I was angry when I woke up sometimes. It was I didn't pray to die or anything like that, but it was just like, what's the point? What am I doing? And so I just figured I'm going to numb myself as much as I possibly can so that I can get through the day. And my day pretty much consisted of a whole lot of nothing, but a little part of me, there was a little light inside of me that always knew, even when it was at its worst, that something one day would happen that would change my life. And it ended up being a lot of different things for me, and I can't really pinpoint what that one thing was for me.
But what were some of them?
I always knew. I can almost answer that better now with my life and how things are after kind of going through this transformation. And again, I have to put a somewhat of a, what we call disclaimer, what it is. But I mean, I still suffer with this condition. I still have chronic pain. I still have, people are starting to use the word persistent pain, because that's somewhat more of a descriptive term for what we deal with, because chronic pain can kind of always be there. But, it may come and go a little bit, whereas persistent pain is something that just never, ever goes away. And that's kind of what I had for so many years. And now it's more, it's persistent, but it's not as intense where I can't function. But I look now at the things that sort of, because I still deal with moments of being depressed and being down and what's the point in all this? I'm in so much pain right now. I'm laying on the floor on ice, and then I'm using heat, and then I'm using these massage tools and trigger point tools, and I'm going to this acupuncturist, massage therapist, and it's I'm tired of all this stuff. What's the point? And then something happens where I hear someone say something that just happens to turn my perspective around. I'll give you an example of that. I was listening to a PBS special with Wayne Dyer, and I was having a tough time, and I was just laying on the floor, and it was early evening, and I had to go to the bathroom, so I'm walking out through the kitchen, and I happened to hear him say something that literally stopped me in my tracks. He said, "If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." Now, I've heard that said many times before, but not in those words. So it's change your perspective, change your attitude, be proactive versus reactive, all that kind of stuff. All pretty much the same thing. I heard those words and bang, I stopped and I went, holy hell. This made me look at life and things differently. So I was playing the victim for so many years, and I realized that I was looking at, I don't need to be perfect in order to go out and do something. We were talking earlier about, me wanting to do like podcasts and making videos and stuff. And I'm still a little apprehensive because of the technology side and some other things that we were chatting about.
Sure.
But I realized, we don't need to be perfect to go out and do things. We can just start doing it. And all of a sudden you learn as you go. And that's what that one line kind of did for me. I decided to start looking at things that I was kind of in a negative way, kind of reversing it and looking at the opportunity versus the obstacle. That's what that quote did for me. That's what that thing he said did for me. And I've carried that with me now for about 10 years.
That's awesome. And I wonder also, you talked about chronic pain, persistent pain. This is a big problem, kind of like an epidemic in our country in terms of like choice of medication when approaching something like that, whether it's turned to the bottle or whether it's turned to medication, prescription medication. What's the solution? Like, what is a solution when dealing with persistent pain? Not necessarily the solution, but what's a solution instead of turning to maybe some of those resources?
First thing I would say is the first thing you have to have is an open mind that there is something else besides drugs. And I'm not in any way against them. I take medications. I wouldn't be able to have survived for the years that I have with this condition had I not had them. And I deal with this. And I have to be really kind of almost careful when I talk about this, because I've actually published some articles that talk about just some little minute experiences that I had with dealing with pain and and some coping mechanisms. And I've been blasted by people who were saying that I'm on some anti-opiate agenda. And I mean, they're completely not even talking about what I've even written about. It's completely off the charts. And all I'm doing is just sharing one particular story about how I've learned to better cope with the pain and ease the emotional stress that pain brings with it. And when I ease that emotional, psychological, component, that actually helps to ease my pain. It may not work for other people, but for me it does. And how do you do that? You utilize some of the things you mentioned. CBD oil is one of them. Meditation, relaxation, breathing, massage therapy, acupuncture, biofeedback, neurofeedback. There's all sorts of different things out there that people can certainly utilize, be it a medical or non-medical approach. And I have learned to deal more with the emotional aspects of it, which I am now finding to be almost more important than getting that massage every day and using all these different tools and things and really working on calming down my mind. Because for years I lived in that what's called sympathetic dominant, and I still do, but I don't think as severe as it was. And sympathetic dominant is basically living in fight or flight. And to live in that state basically causes chronic stress, and chronic stress, of course, will cause illness over a period of time. And so if we can learn to calm down the mind, we can learn to calm down the body and reduce some of, and I'm not saying cure it or get rid of it completely, and it may only be a 5% reduction or no reduction for some people. But for me, learning how to be at peace with whatever is going on has been a tremendous asset to me. And you and I were chatting earlier. I just went through Hurricane Florence. I live in Wilmington. We were the bullseye for the hurricane. I actually was up all night and hearing the storm, and it was getting loud. And around 3, 4, 5 in the morning, the power went out, and it was starting to get warm in here. And I said, I need to get some sleep because tomorrow's going to be a mess out there. So I threw some earplugs in because it was too loud to sleep. And so I threw some earplugs in and I fell asleep. I woke up and I opened up my bedroom door and there was a tree staring at me. A tree limb had pierced through my living room roof and there was water flowing in through the living room.
So
it
crazy.
Man, I could have totally, absolutely freaked out. But I looked at it and my first thought was, how did that get in here? I'm looking around at my windows and I didn't see any broken windows. And I just had no idea. I didn't even think it would have come through the roof.
That's crazy, Tom. That's a heavy sleep, man. That's a heavy sleep right there.
Oh, man. I had the earplugs in really good. I was tired.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I slept through it because I probably would have been far worse. But I didn't I didn't freak out about it. And I was like, okay, we got a little bit of a problem here. What am I going to do about it? I ended up going downstairs and I checked out the situation, and I don't remember if I even put anything to catch the water at that point. I'm not sure, but I went, you know what? I woke up and I was in a little bit of pain from whatever. And I said, I need to lay down again. I said, there's not much I can do about this right now. So I went back to bed for about 10 minutes. And then I walked downstairs and I pulled the tree limb out. I took it out, and just sort of just dealt with it. And the old me would have gone crazy with it. And what would have happened, the increase in the stress and the worry and the fear and all that stuff that comes with it, my neck would have started spasming and contracting and tremoring, and the pain would have been seizing over my body, and I would have been dizzy, and I would have been going through a severe panic attack, and, it would have been a mess. But had I not kept a level head, I wouldn't have done so well. Now, the way that I was able to keep...
The best part of that story of you just getting up, getting around, and going back to the goddamn bed for another 10 minutes and just sleeping this shit off. Like screw this. I'm not going to deal with this today. There's a tree in my house. We'll figure this shit out later. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what was funny is that my parents, who lived not far from me, they were actually, and my sister, I have a lot of family here in town. They decided to go stay at my sister's house, and she was actually out of town, so she was somewhere else. So they went down there because there was a potential for flooding where my parents were, and for her place it was a bit safer, and they went there. Well, they were trying to get in touch with me, and they were unable to. The text, they weren't going through, and calls weren't going through, and so they ended up somehow driving over. They found a way to get through all the trees and the power lines that were down and the water and the flooding and everything, and they ended up parking not in my neighborhood because you couldn't get in here. There was about an 8-foot pile of trees in front of in my driveway. My dad, who's 82, both parents are 82 years old, in really good shape, but still they're hurting in some ways. My dad's got a bum knee, can barely walk. He walked half a mile across, the back of my property. And he comes into my room. He goes, he's out of breath. He's like, "You okay? Why don't you answer my emails and my calls?" I said, "I never got anything." And then when he got there, then the messages went through for some reason. And then I responded to him, and I said, "It's fine." So he said, "Your mom's nervous. She's a nervous wreck over sitting in the car, and we got to get a hold of her." And he was freaking out. And I went downstairs again after I was laying in bed, and I said, "Dad," I said, "let's just relax. Let's just figure this out. Well, there's no reason to panic. There's not a whole lot we can do." I said, "But can we just please get the tree out of the living room?
Yeah.
Can we just start there? Let's just get this thing out of it." So we took care of that, and everything kind of went on. It was funny. It was scary. It was really actually quite scary, but I bring all that up because for so many years, and I say so many years, let's say about 10 years now, I really began to focus on meditation, breathing, calming my mind, and doing it every single day. I schedule in, if possible, periods of time during the day where I rest my body, I rest my mind, I shut everything off, and I shut everything out. And by doing that on a regular daily basis, I think that is what prepared me for that particular event, to handle it as well as I did, and to not have a kickback or setback in my symptoms, which probably would have been the case 10, 11, 12 years ago. And so I bring all that up because the power of the mind is beyond powerful, beyond what we even understand. So if we can learn how to engage the mind in different ways, it can dramatically impact how the extent to which we suffer and the way that we cope with things. That's the long and short of that very long diatribe.
No, it's beautiful.
Right there. Sorry.
That's beautiful. I mean, the old you would have panicked over the tree, flipped out, like, I got a fucking tree in my house. Now you're like, let's decorate this tree. Let's prepare for Christmas early. And I like that.
Yeah.
I like that perspective where you just take it on and just go with it. Now you talk about the techniques of applying it. Meditation helped you a lot. This is a lot of the second part of this interview. You write a ton about handling the mindset, focusing on developing a different mindset when you're adapting to adversity. A lot of our listeners adapt to adversity. Everybody adapts to something. So everybody that's listening is adapting to something. And your experience is dystonia and other things in your life. and their experience is different, but it really is. It comes down to oftentimes a common theme. We're adapting to something difficult. And you talked a lot about the mindset, where you went from maybe what things, in terms of the Wayne Dyer quote, you talked about how when you look at something from a new viewpoint, that changes. What you're looking at changes. And that's really interesting. And I also wonder about, you talk a little bit about how you go from a victim, I am a victim, to a different mindset. I'm no longer the victim. How do you do that?
I think it's different for everybody, and it depends on what you're going through. But I think what you said is a really good point, in that even though everyone's adapting to something, everyone's dealing with adversity in some way, shape, or form. And even though it's different, a lot of us go through a lot of the same emotional, psychological, similarities, so similar experiences. For me, I actually read something somewhere, and it just hit me again, similar to that Wayne Dyer quote, where I said, life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And if you look at the opportunity within the obstacle, then you can transcend the obstacle. And I really embraced that. And I was resistant to that a long time ago. And the more I kept looking at it and I kept hearing it, the more I began to say, you know what I'm doing isn't working. Maybe I try this way. And so I began to embrace that. And that's when things began to really change for me. And I no longer realized that I was a victim. I was no longer someone who, this wasn't happening to me. It was happening for me. And it was happening for me to change my life for whatever particular reason, to go in the direction that it has gone, for me to feel more fulfilled and for me to be able to hopefully help others get through whatever it is that they're struggling with. And so that right there for me has been really helpful. So life is not happening to me. That's the victim status. Life is happening for you. You may not know the reason why, but just accept it, at least work to accept that as a possibility. Just think that this is happening for me. And that then creates options. If you say it's happening to you, then you don't have options. It's almost like saying, why me? Well, you're not going to answer that question really. But if you say, why not me? I'm no different than anybody else. Why not me? What can I do with this that can make me better? Now, to get to that point is very difficult. And when you're really struggling and you're suffering, I know there are people who are listening right now, they're going, Seaman, you're full of shit. There's no way you could ever do that the way I am right now. You don't understand what I'm going through and how this is. I'm dying in pain. I just want to end it all right now. I've been there. I know that it takes time and it's a process. The process, like I said before, is different for everyone. And that's why it's hard for me to lay out a plan from, how do you get from that to where maybe I am now and others are now, like a lot of your guests. And I really think it's a matter of just really staying tuned in with other people who are struggling, who are, whether it be the same thing you're struggling with or something else, listening to podcasts like yours and hearing stories of people who have been through a ton of shit and they've come out clean on the other side. In my book, I use the story of the Shawshank Redemption, the movie The Shawshank Redemption, where he breaks out of jail and he goes through the sewage pipe and he comes out clean on the other side. He went through 500 yards of foul shit to get clear and clean. You have to kind of go through that and allow yourself to go through that to get out on the other side. So listen to people who have been through this. And like me, when I happened to hear that whole Wayne Dyer program, I was doing a PBS special. The one thing I remember from that was that one quote. The rest of it I totally forget. And it was a 3-hour program. So there may be just one little thing that someone says or something that you observe in somebody else who is maybe going through something. And just keep trying to find those things and then try and see how you can incorporate them into your life and just take a baby step each day and change one little aspect about how you approach one little tiny thing in your day. That's what I began doing. What one thing can I do every day? I dealt with severe anxiety and panic attacks where I was afraid to leave the front door. I was afraid to open the front door to go on the porch. I was terrified. And so what I began doing was, okay, I'm going to open the front door. I'm going to walk out and I'll walk down the steps. Maybe I'll do that for a week. I'm going to walk to the end of my street. I'm going to do that, or my driveway. I did that for a week. I said, you know what? I am terrified of driving now. I'm a guy who used to travel the country. And so I went and I began to force myself to drive every day, just around the block. And then I'd come home. and I'd be shaking. I'd go out and do it
Yeah.
again, and I'd come back and I'd be shaking. And so that was my one thing I did every day. And it was, eventually I expanded the amount that I drove, where I drove, and how that's just one aspect of the terror that I live with and how I approached it. But just one day, try and apply a different thought process, try and apply a different technique, try and do something different than what you're doing if nothing is working.
That's a good point. You got to change it up, man. You got to change it up when it's not going well. If you don't change it up, nothing changes. You mentioned stuff about fear, anxiety, agoraphobia, stuff like that that's going on. Whatever it is that's going on. Fear is often what's going to happen next in the future. How do you handle the fear of the future? Like, do you have something specifically? If we climbed into your head right now and said, and found a fear, what is it and how do you approach it?
Really good question also. Fear is crippling, which I think is why you're asking that question. Fear is absolutely crippling. And I have plenty of fears myself. But if you think about it, fear is really all about control, in my opinion. And if you're in control of a situation, there's nothing to be afraid of. If you know what's going to happen, you know how to handle it, what's the reason for being afraid? If you don't have control of a situation and it's going to be whatever it's going to be, no matter what you do, then why be afraid? So basically, there's no reason to be fearful. Because if you're in control of the situation, then you know what the outcome. If you don't know what's going to happen, it's going to happen anyway, then why allow yourself? And it's really, again, it's about self-discipline. Why do you allow yourself, or why do we allow ourselves? And I still do this. So it isn't like I've arrived and I'm there. And I've conquered all this stuff. But I certainly have it. This is a daily practice for me. But I have to remind myself I have no control over this particular situation. Therefore, I cannot allow fear to take me over. I can be fearful, but I can't allow it to imprison me. And I have to learn to let it go and be okay that everything is going to be okay. And that is a very tough thing to do, but that's my mindset.
If you could get into a machine, whatever it is, go back to where you're about to go through dystonia, let's say. You're about to go through all this shit, but you're not there yet. You're about to go into it. What would you say to yourself?
See, part of me thinks that I had to go through everything I had to be where I am right now, and that I wouldn't change a thing. That's one mindset that I have.
Cool. Now I want to ask you this. Yeah. This is something you've written about, I believe, in the recent future. You've written about social media and the impacts it can have on individuals. And you've written about specifically the negative impacts of social media and the potential to, bring upon depression or whatever else. Can you explain that more?
Yeah, I haven't done a ton of research into it, and there's a lot out there, but I have noticed that we do what I call a comparathon, where we may look at social media. Let's take Facebook, for example, which I think is wonderful in many ways, and I think it can be dangerous in other ways, obviously, which is why, of course, you asked the question. Especially if you're living with a health condition, but even if you're not, we look at photographs, we look at videos, we look at posts people put up, and we get only a small window into their lives. We don't really see the behind-the-scenes issues that they may be having with their spouse, with work, with financial issues, with their children, with maybe a health issue, with other things. A lot of people don't share that. They share the really fun, happy stuff that's going on. And if you're suffering with something, and even if you're not, like I said, you look at that and it's hard not to compare. Oh man, they've got the life, and mine, I got to deal with this, and I got to deal with that, and oh God, my life is even. So we feel even worse than we already did by seeing other people who seem to be having a wonderful experience. And I have seen so many people that I know personally that portray themselves as having the absolute wonderful, most amazing life, that I know it's the absolute opposite. And so I think it's important to put it in the proper perspective. A lot of us don't share the dark sides like I do in my book. I mean, I go deep into some dark, heavy stuff that I dealt with. And I'm completely honest and open about everything. And I think I need to be, and I think it's important. And we don't do that on Facebook. We want to portray something different. And I think that's maybe it's a part of denial that we don't want to maybe get into it personally and show those things. And maybe we do it to try and hide more of the intensity. So sometimes the more beautiful stuff and amazing stuff you see might mean that there's even more intense stuff that's being hidden.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you're dealing with a health condition in particular, and you've kind of lost a lot of the life that you once had, which is what happened to me. I was no longer an athlete. I was no longer traveling. I was no longer involved in social things. I mean, those things have changed now, but for years I wasn't doing those things. I'd see people going out and they'd be doing, they'd be traveling or playing baseball and golf and going to sporting events or concerts or whatever. And I was sitting home, laying on the floor, rolling around, trying to find some semblance of peace from all the pain. And the more I saw that, the more angry I became at the world, the more angry I became at these people for no reason whatsoever. It just was, I was filled with so much anger. And so it just fueled my anger. It also fueled my depression because it just reminded me of what I did not have. And when it comes to, say, support groups for a particular condition that you're going through, there are lots of people who are out there who are exposing what they're going through. And it's some heavy stuff. And a lot of us who deal with dystonia and other chronic conditions, we're sensitive. We're sensitive to those kinds of things. There's actually a condition, not a condition. It's a personality trait called the highly sensitive person. And there's a whole book written about it, and it's quite fascinating actually. But there are people who really they have this. It's similar to an empath, and so we embrace and we can feel what other people are feeling. And if you're someone like that, I think it's really important to be very careful about what you look at and how much you allow yourself to take on the pain of other people, because their journey is their journey, yours is yours, and to take it on in addition to what you're dealing with is, I think, the wrong way to go about it. But it's what I think fuels more of that depression, that anxiety, that whatever person is experiencing when they're seeing all of these horror stories that people are sharing out there and what they're going through.
If you could provide it, like it when I think of social media too, like not necessarily provide a method or something, but does it seem like the solution is kind of the pull back on it?
I think it's important to pull back for some people. And I know some people who have completely removed it from their lives, and they are feeling so much better just by reducing that stressor from that. But you think about it, it's similar to an addiction. If you're posting something and all of a sudden you get a notification and someone likes your picture, and now you can love it, you can smile at it, you can laugh at it, you can get angry, all sorts of different reactions you can have to a post. Those reactions affect us in real life. I mean, it's almost like Pavlov's dogs. Ding, and you go and you get your food. Ding, I got a notification. Ooh, someone liked it. Ooh, and it lights up the same centers of the brain as those for, eating sugar and doing cocaine or drinking or whatever it might be. The pleasure centers of the brain are lit up, and so it can become addicting and dangerous.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think people need to be real careful with it.
Worse yet, you could, or similar, not necessarily worse yet, but similarly, you could have that kid or that person looking in a mirror all the time and be like, man, I don't look like that picture. I don't look like that standard that's been laid out for us. And it could really mess a kid up pretty good, especially. That seems to be one of the big issues. Somebody outlined it really well recently, outlined on a teen perspective of how dangerous it's been, the social media side of things for well-being, not necessarily like, oh no, look what's coming, but more like well-being. It really messed up. It's messed up a whole population of kids, which really sucks. I was thinking about you for this. So you have a chance to go to a group of kids that maybe are like, I don't know, 16, 17, those vulnerable years, man, where you're developing, you're like, shit, I don't know what to do. And you're dressing in weird ways you may have not have dressed before. You're just adapting to all the craziness, trying to fit in, trying to find your place in society. And maybe you haven't, if you're lucky, you haven't encountered anything significant in terms of adversity, but you probably are. Everybody's going to encounter significant adversity if they live long enough. It's just what happens. And so what would be the first step you tell these kids when they encounter adversity? It doesn't have to be one step, but what would be the first thing you tell them?
The first thing I would do it just sounds real silly, but it's going to be okay. This is a part of growing up, part of life, part of the experience. Everyone deals, like you said, everyone deals with this. Everyone goes through different things. I'm right here to help you get through this. I've been through this myself. I think that's probably coming from a personal perspective. And that's probably the way I should really answer this versus like, what should someone else say? I'm thinking, what would I say? I'd say, you know what? I'm right here by your side. I'm going to help you through this. And this is going to pass. It seems like your life is going to pure pot right now. And it's like, it's all over, but this will get better. And I'm going to teach you how to get through it. Just to let them know that they're not alone really is the key thing, I think. Just to find a way to say you're not alone. How you do that, maybe not all the ways I just described, but maybe some other ways. Let them know, you know what? You're going to be okay. This is going to be okay. Everyone's going through this.
Well, this interview has been flying, man. We have so much to cover. I think the biggest takeaway from this interview is you provide a template on how to adapt to adversity as it arrives on your doorstep. I do believe that as people approach you, and we'll have in our show notes everything for in terms of contact information, your website, your social media accounts, all the good stuff is going to be there. But before we take off, before we close out this interview, what's like one takeaway item that they can take with them that you might share with them? Maybe like I often ask for a book or nowadays a video or a clip or something. Like if you wanted to share a clip or something, maybe you post it on your Facebook page, whatever it is. What's something that you take away and offer that you think could change their day today?
Yeah, I'd like to just, I think, something that is important for us to really understand and appreciate is that we need to learn to be okay with what we view as not okay and somehow find a way to get there. And I think by embracing a lot of the challenges that we have versus when we are experiencing difficulty in our lives, we often, this kind of goes back to before I was talking about playing the victim role. We sometimes resist what's happening and we fight against it. And I think sometimes fighting against what we're dealing with actually creates a situation where it worsens the situation. It's almost like you think about, anytime we declare war on something, it gets worse. It creates, it becomes combative. And I think if we can learn how to embrace what's happening, work with it, that helps us work through it. So if we can, this is kind of corny, but we have to embrace it to erase it. And that's a challenge that many of us, we all go through in all different parts of our lives. But for me, I've found that accepting, and I had a recent blog that came out it said, "Screw this pain, I choose better." And it actually has a quote from the book, The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And it talks about the very first words, life is difficult. And, once we truly accept this, once we truly accept that it's difficult, then it no longer matters. I think that's quite powerful. And that's one of the ways that I have found to transcend through, to work through the challenges of my life, is to not fight against them, but fight the desire to give up on yourself during tough times. Don't fight the disease, fight the desire to give up on yourself and work through the disease, or whatever it is you're dealing with.
You have such a good template for how to embrace adversity as it comes, how to adapt to that adversity as it comes, how to change the mindset. And the template's there. And I think as listeners turn to some of the resources you have, actually you have a lot of resources, whether it's your book, your writings, whatever, you have a bunch of videos too. It applies across the board to everybody. And I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, sharing a bit of your story, sharing a lot of your knowledge, getting out there and just showing us, some of the ways we can improve our situation and move forward. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
And that's our episode. Remember, you can find contact information for guests in the show notes or on our website, livingadaptive.com. On livingadaptive.com, you can also find previous episodes, writings, and a bunch of other good stuff talking about adapting. So go there. Peace.